Hello and welcome to Canadians with Disabilities and Their Allies. My name is Brent Frain. I'm the host. The show is known as PWD Allies Podcast. Check it out on your favorite app where you find it best suited for you. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you enjoy the content, consider donating or being a sponsor. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to be a guest, definitely reach out to myself or Neil and we'll get you scheduled in for the month of July. Today I have former MP Cheryl Hardcastle rejoining me today on the show, and we're going to be talking about the CDB and current events that are going on. It's always lovely to have you join me, Cheryl. Always
Thank,
welcome to come on here anytime you want.
thank you. It's great to be here with you guys today. And yeah, talking about every issue that faces Canadians. You can look at any issue through a disability lens, right?
Mhm.
So it's all relevant to us. And it's a great current events show and helps people that live with disabilities to really, and allies to really look with that lens when we're talking about anything, whether it's affordable housing, groceries, our constitution, and, how can a province be allowed to claw back a federal benefit and all that kind of stuff, right?
Mhm.
Let's start
Exactly.
let's start with the CDB though. Let's start there.
Yeah.
Sure.
And the announced $200.
$6.66 a day to 40% of the population. Yeah.
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 What
That's
a what a frustration and such a bitter disappointment. Um, and other people will tell you, and it is true. At least you're creating. So we're trying to look at the cup half full right now for a minute. Let's do that.
sure.
So the cup half full is we're going to have a line item in a budget
Yeah.
federally for the first time that is designated specifically
Mhm.
for that benefit, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Structurally, legislatively, we've got the structure in place now um, for that benefit. Now, the cup half empty. Um, it's not enough. It's not realistic. It doesn't fulfill what it said it was going to do to fulfill obligations under the United Nations Convention on the Rights for People with Disabilities. There's all kinds of legislative areas that fall short. I just remember, I think it was about a year ago at this time when the minister of the day was still Minister Qualtrough, accepting amendments from the Senate, except for the one that said that even private insurance companies won't be allowed to claw back these benefits. So
Mhm.
rejecting that amendment. So not just are we having to deal with the amount of money not being realistic, but we're having to deal with still some of the issues within that the structure of the legislation. And don't forget, I'm going to jump a little bit here.
Mhm.
So the structure within that, there are shortcomings that have to be addressed. But we were told, if you remember, that could be done in regulation. So let's do this in regulation then, and hopefully a new government will be more proactive in social justice arenas and will look at amending some of the language so that it isn't just in regulation. Because as we know, regulation is at the whim of the government of the day.
Yeah, and
That's what makes it vulnerable. You want it enshrined
yeah.
in legislation. So that's half full, half empty. That's a broad view of what we're facing with the Canada Disability Benefit. And there's still more. I know Jagmeet Singh of the NDP, which is the caucus I was in when I was the critic for people living with disabilities, and which got me engaged and got us connected. Why you graciously invite me back to have these kinds of fulsome conversations with you about how things are evolving. But they have said that we're going to put pressure on this, but it wasn't a deal breaker to say we're going to call an election.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the regulations versus the legislation though, because I think one of the biggest pieces is when they talk about poverty level income, poverty level, right? I mean, there are the two measures of poverty level that government likes to use. There's the MBM and the LICO, right? So we know
Yeah.
what poverty level is. Now, why that at least couldn't have been put in the legislation of poverty level,
Hmm.
Yeah,
that is one thing that definitely could have and should have gotten in there, is the
yeah,
Absolutely.
poverty level piece. Yeah.
yeah. I agree because it started off, it was supposed to um, eliminate poverty.
Mhm.
Then it was reduce poverty
Hmm.
among working age. Like it just, there was so much slippage with that. But that's where we, that's where there's a lot of heartbreak right now, like on a personal level, because even when you look at the testimony at committee, whether it's at the Senate or when it went to HUMA in the House of Commons, when they were studying in C-22, which is the Canada Disability Benefit, when that was being studied and there were witnesses and there was testimony, we all heard the rhetoric, we heard the promises. We got to hurry up. People are in need. We'll take care of that in regulation. We'll take care of that in regulation. We'll take care of that in regulation. And there has been no significant movement on any of that. As a matter of fact, just kind of going back to like current events, the most significant movement to me has been on June 13th in the NDP caucus, the Benita Zarrillo, who is the critic for people living with disabilities of the day, and MP Laurel Collins, they tabled a bill that it's just had first reading. There's been no other movement on it. So this was just last Thursday, right?
Mhm.
But it was a bill that would basically mean, I'm kind of going to short form, really simplify it. But basically, the gist of it is that people who will be receiving the persons with disabilities benefit would receive automatic approval for federal benefits like the disability tax credit, Canada Pension Plan Disability, and Canada Disability Benefit.
Hmm.
And if you are already deemed and you're getting a benefit from your province, if you've already been through that process, that you don't need to redo this.
Mhm.
So at least that's addressing some of the real systemic issues that have not been addressed that we were told they will be addressed in regulation. Well, having this bill passed, I think it adds another layer of accountability now to the government to address some of the things that were clearly identified and have been identified. I know when I've been on before, we've talked about reports from the Senate study hearings with regards to how insufficient, inadequate the process is for that disability tax credit issue. And why are we not using, if you are already deemed eligible in your province, that should be enough for you to get plugged in to these other programs. And that doesn't mean you're promised. What it
Hmm.
means is you're plugged in, you're approved to go through the system and see where your eligibility lies for each of them.
Hmm.
It's a huge hurdle for people to have to go through all these different processes. So yeah, that's called Bill C-403. So if people want to look it up and see the status of it, or maybe they want to read the text for themselves, just remember it's C-403, and it was tabled on June 13th, last week, 2024. And what else did I want to say about it? Yes, it was tabled by MP Zarillo and seconded by MP Collins in the NDP caucus. So we'll see where we go with that now, because besides that, when we talk about strengthening regulation, if that's what we're left with now in the timelines, what's realistic? If it is regulation, then we need House of Commons petitions. Mm-hmm. And there's one that closed a little bit earlier today that was MP Mike Morris's petition with regards to affordability and the amount for the Canada Disability Benefit. So that one's done. I think a lot of people may have already signed on to it. I think that one became active. I want to say, was that like April? Was probably
around, yes.
April that way. But there are a couple other petitions that help us strengthen legislation coming along too.
Yeah. So there's Jeff Salisbury has got one going, which is good.
Yeah. So so for people who want to go, and I'll just remind you, so you go to ourcommons.ca, and then from there, so Our Commons, OURCOMMONS.ca. And when you get to that landing page, you can see action, you can see petitions. There's a search bar. You can type in C403, or if you know the petition number. So yeah, Mike Morris's that we were talking about, that was E4993 that closed today. Mm-hmm. So sorry if people didn't get to that one. But there is one that doesn't close until October 16th. It's E5035. And that's Jeff Salisbury's, sponsored by Blake Desjardins. And that is the one that talks about the disability tax credit and its barriers, and the maximum amount being insufficient to alleviate poverty. So it's about social affairs and equality. So let me just get to the next one, and then we can go back and do some conversation. The next one is, so that one was to ensure no clawbacks from provincial or territorial governments, and ensure that the Canada Disability Benefit doesn't end at age 65. That's another important point, because your disability doesn't go away when you turn 65. And we do have proven, financial pressures. It costs more to live with a disability. All these arguments that have been made at several committees in the House of Commons. And why I mention it that way is because they have to provide evidence. They provide thoughtful witness statements, and as much evidence as they can is provided to the committee. So it's not the same as scrolling through your social media and seeing a catchy meme or a catchy quote or sharing an opinion. It's not the same thing. It's directly related, and one can feed the other, of course. We live in a democracy, and we do hope that the will of the people in terms of social justice does inform all of our policymakers, all of our legislators. But when I stress that committee evidence, that's why. It's because it was prepared and articulated thoughtfully for committee purposes, for our legislators, for our elected representatives, and we can hold them accountable. So with
There's
that,
another petition that's out there too. It's 4988.
Okay. Do you want to talk to that one, or?
Yeah,
that's MJ's, right? MJ?
And then I'll come back with the next one. Okay.
Yeah, if you could, if you could pull that one up.
Do you see it there, Cheryl?
Are you sharing it, or are you asking me to pull it up?
The 4988. 4988.
Yeah.
Pull it up on a website? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hang on, I got to pull up my Google and all that stuff then.
Okay.
Yeah, MJ has a petition out there too.
4988.
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, barriers to employment. I just want to go, okay, yeah, closed for signature on September 13th. Oh, yeah, that's Mark Straull's. Yeah, I did see that one.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So if you look at the whereas, there's nothing to disagree with in the whereas, but in we the undersigned, it's it's make each province and territory that receives a social transfer payment accountable for how they spend the money, how much people, disabled people receive each month, and make them accountable to make sure the intended people get their fair share and that it's not being spent on other than social programs. So it's another way of talking about accountability and talking about like addressing clawbacks, right? That's how that one works. So yeah, that closes on the 13th. Sorry, I had skipped that one. I don't know why. I think because the two that I had directly relate to actually the issue of a payout, the actual payout issue and the amount. So this one talks about it's a talks about a universal basic income and talks about refusing to acknowledge the expanding availability of medical assistance in dying, yet refusing to acknowledge that we need financial support mechanisms in place so that that is not what someone turns to. And I think that's important because we've been having that candid and very truth-facing discussion in the disability and allies community about what are we doing, the pace of developing a meaningful Canada disability benefit is definitely not meeting the pace of medical assistance in dying accessibility. Yeah. It's not meeting the pace and it's irresponsible. They should be being done in tandem because that's where the emotional arguments and the frustration comes in, and that like people are there's broken promises. And then you have this happening. It just adds more insult to injury, so to speak.
Well,
so
especially we're supposed to go to like over 1 million people and then down to 600,000 and then down to 25,000. It's like, wow.
Yeah, they're playing with numbers. Yeah.
So a universal basic income for Canadians of all income classes and a guaranteed livable basic income for Canadians who are retired, disabled, or living with mental illnesses. So that is directly what this petition speaks to. So I think that's important. These petitions work in a variety of ways in terms of the strategy of how policy evolves, how policy development happens, how policy gets into the realm of actually legislators looking at and passing bills, passing laws, right? So when it's a House of Commons petition, it has to be tabled in the House. You have a minute to say what you're tabling, and you can encapsulate the will of people. And so that gets on the record as well in the House of Commons. That it was discussed, that it goes on the record, it's on the Hansard. It gets talked about in that parliamentary realm. This is your way of ensuring that is done, which is very important. And depending on how many petitions you have, if you have, 500, one MP can table it. If you have two sets of petitions with it, you can have two MPs standing up and tabling. Three, four, you gain momentum when you have different House of Commons petitions that are done. What happens, I notice, and why I'm spending the time really talking about what you need when you have a House of Commons petition, because now they're online, so they are more accessible to all Canadians everywhere. They're electronic. They are accountable. There is an attestation that you do before you get in your email a code so that you can sign the petition. So there is a protocol that makes it responsible. And it goes on the record. It's an important social signal to our parliamentarians and to other Canadians when it goes on the Hansard, and our MPs. All our MPs are kept in the loop. And then government accountability, because a minister must respond to a petition that's tabled. There has to be a reply. So those are very, very important things in the evolution of legislation in that long game. And what I am just going back now, why I said I'm explaining how important it is because I know a lot of us want to take advantage of having the internet and helping us to be more activist. We learn more, we have access to studies, we have access to reports and activities, but you want to be activist and it makes you, oh, I'm going to sign this petition. And they're not really petitions that go to any governing bodies. They're petitions that just bring an online community together to recognize each other and share a narrative. When you get in your inbox, if you've ever signed one of these non-governmental petitions, you get on a database and then they go, sign this petition. And it's all things you care about, plastics in the water, access to fresh water, you name it, right? It's all things that we care about, but they are non-governmental.
Yeah, nobody really sees it. Yeah.
And there are advantages to those too in some ways, because you need campaigns, you need momentum of the public to bring things to fruition. But yeah, a House of Commons petition is really important. And those are the two. So that's the most recent things, these petitions that are coming forward, and that bill to address the, I don't even know what I want to call it now. It's disability tax credit. It's so onerous. And
I know.
Yeah. It costs money, and not everybody that has a disability or is getting a disability benefit from their province is eligible for this one. I don't want to go into it too much and get too boring and technical, but I know I've said, like I think I said a minute ago, there are really well done reports. The Senate report that I've mentioned before really, really articulates where the issues are and lays out recommendations on how to clean up the disability tax credit and address some of these shortcomings, and how we bring the provinces in. These could be things that, like I said, start out in regulation and end up being amendments to actual legislation. A lot of times you're taking risk when you try something new. A pilot is meant to be a pilot, and where you have all this subject matter expertise in a lot of different areas, take a real scholarly approach to looking at a pilot and how something is addressed. And that's how I see the regulations. There'll be regulations, and then we'll see what needs to be done, and we'll go one step further and actually enshrine it in the legislation.
That's why Bill 403 would be really beneficial to streamline things, so that the hurdle can automatically just be smoothed right out, and then kind of from that point
Yeah.
on is building up the
Yeah.
wall mount.
And
Yeah.
the DTC was something that, I mean, everybody in the disabled community was saying, that's a huge barrier. I mean, everybody was saying it.
Mhm.
So the fact that they made that the kind of the one prerequisite is
I
kind
know
of really disappointing, right?
it
But
is.
you were talking about the e-petitions, Cheryl, and I'm just thinking maybe a strategy should be that maybe what we should do is everybody should coordinate it so that every MP gets one e-petition, and then and
Yeah.
then they have to
Everybody has it.
coordinate it so
Yeah.
the whole house has
No,
to
man.
present one e-petition on
There, yeah,
it.
there is merit to that. It does take volunteer time on a Canadian activist's part. It does
Yeah.
take time from an MP, but uh, to prep it and be able to sponsor it, and it takes some of that, yes. But I think it is well worth it because of the way that it allows for narratives to
Mhm.
be brought forward in a straightforward way in the Hansard, because
That's a
um
great
a
idea.
lot gets lot there's a lot of noise. Like if you just go with mainstream media and our our traditional media now does include social media, there's like it's still lacking in how we have clear messages. And I think petitions are a way, are a crucial way that we exercise democracy and accountability,
Mhm.
because a minister, like I said, does have to respond. And there's no saying the quality of the response. It doesn't say, there's no law that says that a minister can't give the same rote answer to several similar petitions, but it's that you have to, and that you have to be accountable if someone says to you,
Yeah.
oh, you gave the same response to bill or to E 97993 that you gave to, this one. So it does give us a level of like a direct conduit in ways that we think we have with social media, but it's actually very deceiving.
Mhm.
I know people who get tired out with their activist responses and their due diligence monitoring social media and putting links to reports and telling someone they're factually incorrect and
Oh,
trying
yes.
all that, and you can burn yourself out. I know from my limited experience in trying to be an activist, like social media can really burn you out if you're using
Mhm.
it for that purpose.
Yeah.
And otherwise, if you're using it for your opinion, it can be very therapeutic. You can find community and all those kinds of things. There are good, there's the half full, half empty to all of it. And I really appreciate you guys, giving me time when we talk. You don't interrupt me and you let me go on. I really try not to just rant about how bad things are. I try, like, we can move this forward, and here's what we
Yeah.
have to do. We've got to do that. I think for me to be able to keep going and to not be overwhelmed and not feel so defeated, because some of the news is, you guys have probably had more devastation and personal impact than myself. Some of this stuff, it just like you just feel like someone's punched you in the gut when you what?
Hmm.
You're only doing that. Like, where did you get this?
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so you do have to try and you have to try and find that silver lining to get your energy. And if it takes a week or a few days to and if you need to rant and get it out first and then get back in the game, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the other hard thing, the durability, isn't it, of being being someone who is trying to do all this work for people living with disabilities. We've talked about this before. This is not this isn't the cool group. This isn't the elitists of the country, right?
Exactly.
We're always trying to bring attention to these issues. And when we have to do it as a community, when someone's tired out or exhausted or hurt from something, someone else carries the baton for a while.
Well, I had to laugh today because this morning Brent sent me a message, just a text message. He said, I was on the radio this morning talking about about the rents, and I said we must have been connected our brains, because I said I just sent an email about the clawbacks. So we both sent off something at the in the morning about for me it was the clawbacks, for him it was the rents.
Tell us a little bit more about it then, Brent. What station was this? What is this I show or local?
It was a local show. It was a local CKNW, which is our local news feed in BC here. And actually, they do crosstalk, which goes across the country too on Fridays. But I phoned up to the local show. The reason why I called in, it was very interesting when it comes to housing, because housing, I mean, as we know, housing is in a crisis situation across Canada. I call it a state of emergency, actually, personally. I mean, I call it what it is. It's a state of emergency rather than a crisis, because if it's a state of emergency, more ambition would be to get things resolved at all levels of government, to get to the bottom of what is affordable for who. So when there was a real estate agent that was actually on the show, it called in, and I recognized the person's name. His name's Steve Sereski, and he had called in, and he was talking about how people can't afford housing. Like, I mean, he's a real estate agent. He said everything's on the sideline right now. Nobody's buying, nobody's selling too much. With the interest rates now have been did a rate cut. Bank of Canada did a rate cut of 0.25%. It's really not going to have too much of an impact right now. It's the blossoming effect that is going to have when people renew their mortgages. And now they're talking about maybe there might be another rate cut going forward. Now with affordability, with people as their incomes are not high enough because of the cost of housing has ballooned up so high. So people have now got these mortgages. If they go to renew, their payments are going to be so high, and people that are on the sidelines right now trying to get into the housing market, their down payment, they can't even do that with all the housing measures, stress tests that are put in place in BC. It makes it very difficult. But I understand why these stress tests are put in place too, right? There's certain stop points where, you got to see if you can actually afford that payment. So when it came into place, we started talking about people that are having a hard time renting, because these people that are in the housing that can't get in, they're actually renting. So they're taking up the housing stock. And now the corporate landlords, they're having a heyday right now. I mean, they're cracking open the champagne and everything else, going, hey, our record profits are going high, and as high as sky's the limit, as high as it can go. I mean, I live in a corporate, from a corporate landlord right now, and they admit is the investors want their rate of return, right? So if somebody moves out, the rent goes up as high as they want it to go. It's scary. So when I figure, okay, you know what, I'm going to call in, because he had said to the realtor, I'm going to take calls after you're done. We're done with you, and I want to hear how housing has affected your life. Either you own or you rent. Can you afford to move? What is your rent? How is things affecting your life? So I thought, this is an opportunity. I call in on a regular basis to the show. The moderator said, who are you? Where are you calling from? I said, well, it's Brent, and I'm calling from Victoria. And he goes, oh, hey, how's it going, buddy? I go, good. And he's like, yeah. So I told him my situation. He goes, yeah, Mike would love to talk to you. Mike gave me 2 minutes on the show. I thought that was really generous of him to do that, because
kind of unheard of.
Well, because they're very time strained, where everything's on the watch, right? And it's like I said, it's like in our BC legislature, when you're sitting in the gallery, you can see the time on there and how long members actually have to talk, and you can see them thinking, "There's no way they can get this down." Yep, right down to the point. The odd time they'll go over a few seconds. Is like, so I've learned over time with podcasts, same thing, getting my point in and getting it done. And on the radio, same thing. And I crunched down. I just said, so I live in Victoria. I'll tell you what I said. So I live in Victoria, person with a disability. I'm on a disability pension. I go, well, it was a pension. But anyway, I said, anyway, on a fixed income, my income's like $1,500 a month. My rent's pretty close to 1,500. I said, so I pay 50% of my income because my roommate and I, we share the cost. And he says, oh my gosh. He said, that's huge. I go, yeah, so 50% of your income. And I said, I'd love to move to the lower mainland, but I can't afford to because housing is too expensive. I mean, you're looking at $2,600 minimum for a two-bedroom apartment in Langley. And he goes, yeah, that's kind of a kind of a minimal amount. I mean, that amount probably even higher. I go, yeah. And he goes, so you need to stay put. You need to stay put where you are. You've got cheap rent. I mean, anyone would kill to have your place. I mean, in a sense. I mean, just no, maybe not word kill, probably not a good word to use, but anyone would love to have your rent. Problem is, we move out, nobody would have our current rent. They'd be paying what the
No.
market will bear
Yeah.
higher. But for us, it's high rent. And he goes, I feel for you. And I said, like, well, we don't know what to do. I mean, we move out of province. We can't move out of province, which I don't want to do that anyway, because I love BC. I love where I live. And I said, we'd have to reapply from scratch for disability in another
Yeah.
province. And I said, so, I mean, what do we do? He goes, stay put. Just don't get yourself evicted.
Well,
Yeah.
and also the other day, Brent, let's just quickly
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
mention this as well. You were talking to BC Housing,
Right.
which is the social housing here in British Columbia,
Right.
and you were talking to somebody directly there, and just briefly in
Yeah. I'll give you
2 minutes or less, give the breakdown of what was told
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. So an overview of the conversation was I phoned up just to inquire. A lot of people in my community, in my neighborhood, from time to time have been asking me about finding cheaper housing. So I said, okay, well, I'll phone up a housing provider and I'll gather up information. So I said, well, so if two people are friends, or their roommates and they want to get into BC housing, how would they go about doing that? People are disabled. They just want cheaper housing. Okay, so where do they live? I go with market housing, but they want cheaper housing in the BC housing. Okay, well, you need to meet the criteria. There's guidelines that need to be met. And number one, singles, couples, families with children, seniors. So people with disabilities, no problem. But friends or roommates do not qualify. And I said, so there's no wiggle room? There's no wiggle room, he said. So I'm not sure where you're going with this. I go, again, I said, say two friends are that are disabled or roommates. I mean, sharing the cost of higher rent. I mean, they want cheaper housing. Sir, you're not understanding, he said. You're not understanding. I go, no, I understand what you're saying. And I go, it's discrimination. He goes, no, it's how the policies are set, and those are the guidelines. If you don't meet the guidelines, you will not qualify. So what I'm telling people in the long run here, basically to make things short, is don't bother applying if you are friends or a roommate under BC housing. They will, and the guy told me to tell people that they will be disqualified immediately. I don't want you to go through all the paperwork, all the rigmarole. If you are together as a couple, you are boyfriend, girlfriend, you're married, fine. They will get you housing, but you'll be on a waiting list. And that waiting list
Yeah.
is at least 10 years waiting list. Families first, apparently. Then they go down the list. So it's unfortunate because people that are in market housing, they have friends or their roommates. Why can't they live in BC housing? It's the same thing.
I don't know if you're aware, Cheryl, but like here in BC, um, when it comes to human rights or disability discrimination, um, only with respect to tenancy, only with respect to tenancy, uh, does the source of income apply? Like source of income is not usually a grounds for discrimination here in BC. You can't say that source of income is a grounds for discrimination except for tenancy. But even in that case, our provincial government violates that so much, right?
Well,
There's so much discrimination going on where like some people are getting the subsidized housing, and like we've talked before, like 10 to 12% get the subsidized housing. That means like 90% aren't. And I mean,
well,
so how
yeah,
is that not discriminatory?
but
It so
Yeah.
is, right?
but Neil, one quick question I had to him was, is that people in market housing, they could be on separate files. They could be having friends. I mean, the high market rent. But he said, no, under BC housing, no, like that does not qualify as a guideline. He gets it. He says, I go, well, I mean, one of the ministers way back when said, you got to do what you got to do. I mean, to make it happen because of high market rent. So you could have up to 8 people in a 2 bedroom and a bachelor, or like a 2 bedroom and a den. I mean, not that you want that many people in an apartment building. I mean, managers would freak. I mean, they would. I mean, we actually have that down our hall in our building. There's like 8 people living down the hallway. But I mean, yeah, I mean, because the rents are so high, so they're sharing the cost. But in BC housing umbrella, that wouldn't happen. Like I explained that, and he goes, "Wow, no, that would never happen under our umbrella, unfortunately." But he said again, it's policy. And one of the ministers that used to be involved with the MSDPR, going back a little ways, not too far, Minister Simons said that it's just a policy. It's a policy. It just needs to be changed. He admitted that it's a policy. It needs to be changed. And until it's changed, it's going to stay that way. And I figured that maybe I had phoned yesterday and I figured maybe it was changed. No, it's still the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's
That,
unfortunate, right? I mean, because people just want affordable housing. I mean, they don't want to pay all their money to market.
yeah, people want a place to live.
Yeah.
When you were talking about stress tests that we
Yeah.
use in market housing, because we have no more non-market housing. Our housing crisis is because every government is turning to the market, turning to the private sector for answers, and they're not there. But
Mm-hmm.
that's what they're doing because they don't have the political courage for whatever reason.
Yeah.
It pits us against each other that are struggling for housing.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of non-market housing being able to address the affordability crisis, because in the private sector, those stresses that you were talking about, we use those too to inform us in other policies for poverty reduction strategies, for budgets, for instance. And I know that's provincial, but okay, 30% of your income is supposed to be able to go to your roof over your head.
Mm-hmm.
That's that's what is that's the number, that 30%. I'm sure now people are, but it hasn't officially been changed yet.
Yeah.
Okay. It hasn't been made higher, even though that's the reality. That's what it should be then.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it looks like when we were in Ontario. Every municipality has to have a poverty reduction strategy. So I worked on that strategy, and we identified a living wage that was based on these different numbers that you plug in, like 30% of your income is is for your is for housing, is for
Mm-hmm.
your, well,
So
that's not what it is now.
what
It's
did what did a livable wage look like for you then, Cheryl?
I don't know what it I could look it up what it is right now, but this was like about 10
Oh,
years
okay.
ago. It
Okay.
was like,
I wasn't aware that
yeah,
was that
that
long
was
ago.
while I
Okay.
was still municipal before I got into
Okay.
federal, but it was like $18.73 at the time, like 10 years ago.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And minimum wage was, I think it was not quite, it wasn't quite 15 yet. It wasn't 15. Now in October of this year in Ontario, the minimum wage will increase again to $17.20,
Mm.
which is not,
Yeah.
it's not going
Yeah.
to move any needles for anybody.
No.
And with the way that food security, because at one time you used to be able to say, well, $12, if I get $12 more a week, I can buy my fresh produce. I can buy, you can't say that now. Food
Oh,
costs have gone up so much that I don't even know how much it'll address food insecurity. Um, and people want to eat healthy. I just want to go to an aside for a minute. You guys
yeah.
tell me, because I'm here in Windsor, Ontario, and I'm about 4 blocks from the Detroit River. And when I look across the river, I look at the city of Detroit. And if
No.
you're driving on certain roads in Windsor and you're a newcomer and you see this beautiful skyline and all these skyscrapers, you go, wow, I can't believe I've never been to Windsor before. It's so big. No, that's Detroit. That's the Detroit
Yeah.
skyline. Anyway, so between Windsor and the surrounding county, Windsor and Essex County, there is less than 500,000 people that live here.
Oh,
It's still pretty crowded though, but food costs have gone up so much. And one of the habits, like I don't know if you have Loblaws, like it's boy,
yeah.
Mhm.
boycott Loblaws. Well, it's not just them, and we're talking about shrinkflation. We all have
Hmm.
stories about shrinkflation, but the other one to me too is, especially because you got me thinking of that as a single person, it's very hard to live and survive. Like you were talking about these guidelines where you can't be friends and share
Yeah.
expenses of a home. Also, like when you go and buy your groceries, if you want the deal, you got to buy three. Do you guys
Yeah.
have that too?
Yeah,
Like
Yes.
yeah.
that's what it is
Yeah.
here.
It's
You gotta
Um,
have
huge.
a huge fridge to fit it
you
all
gotta
in.
have okay, and I gotta
And it
stick my
spoils.
with yeah, it spoils, or you gotta like, oh, I guess I'm just eating cauliflower so I can get the deal this week. I'm
Yeah.
eating
Or
cauliflower and
or
Italian.
you buy
Like,
one, and the price is actually even higher.
no, yeah,
Like a head
the
of
price,
lettuce
you don't get
costs.
the deal. You don't get the
Yeah.
deal if you don't buy. And same like cans of beans and things that are good protein when
Yeah.
you're trying to eat as healthy as possible on these budgets. And if you want the deal, you got to buy five or you got to buy three. I find that so maddening. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I find that
Like
all the time. Like I mean, like broccoli, 4.49 a pound, or I mean, like, and then you have to hope that it's actually fresh.
I
You go
wish
there, oh man, it's just like
I
yeah,
wish
to
we
get it
had
done.
quick, like when they were talking about grocery affordability, one of the things I wished was, can we please, if regulation is the whim of the government, can we just have government say whatever's in their federal regulate, whatever's in federal jurisdiction for food supply, like you can only sell that, you have to sell this by a unit price.
Hmm.
And
Mhm.
you can't do sales that way. I don't know.
Yeah, there was another a bill out there. I'm not sure. Maybe if you know, it's a Kim Pate and Lee Gazan have their GLBI two bills that are their S233 and 223. I think it is. I believe it is. I always get
Yeah,
those numbers mixed up.
me too.
I remember that. I remember when I actually had them on, and I used the number. It was for the opposite person. I'm like, oh no,
Yeah,
that's not you. No, it's
yeah.
okay.
Mm, no, it's not S223.
233 maybe, isn't
I don't know. And
Yes.
it's a Senate bill.
it? Yeah.
There
What is it?
one of them is a Senate, and one of them was just
And there are there
Parliament.
private member bill? Are they private members' bills? Is it a private members' bill?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. One was League is on. That was the
Okay.
Parliament one.
Yeah, their bills for the GLBI, guaranteed livable basic income.
Oh yeah. Okay. Um, I don't. Yeah. No. Oh, three 322.
Is it? Oh,
School for the okay. That's the school food program. Yeah.
oh.
Oh,
Yeah.
school food program. Well, that's different then.
Hmm.
That. But so maybe you're thinking of Senator Pates then.
Yes.
Yeah, there's Senator Payne, and then there was an equal
Leah's
one submitted by League is on. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Well, her private members bill is the school food program.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
So maybe it's a different bill. I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe.
there
It's not.
was one about a GLBI, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Anyway,
Yeah.
that's fine. I'll look back in our archives and find the number. But
The
yeah.
thing is, and a lot of times they build on work or something that's been done previously and then
Mm.
got lost, right? Or failed, didn't pass, and then people bring it back. So
I can see if I can find.
we're always building on work that's been done, and we need to build it up. One of the things that I know, um I have I remember this poster and buttons that we had in my office, was charity is good, justice is better. And it comes from a quote from St. Augustine.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
charity, yeah, charity is no substitute for justice withheld. And that's always what I think of when, oh, we're going to give more money to food banks, or when
Mm.
you are at the grocery store. The other thing that people find really irking is, if you're paying with a debit card or something and you're using the um, technology for
Mm.
banking methods to pay for your groceries, and oh, do you want to round it up and
Oh
donate
yeah.
to our
Hmm.
this fund for like, you're a multinational corporation. No, I don't want to contribute to yours. People find that maddening today because the
Yeah.
the increase in food costs. And we see the quarterly profit reports. It's not like, um
Well, even the automation
they're
feeds.
all hurting. There's excess, right?
Yeah.
There is excess happening,
I
So
and
you,
found
we need to
I
be honest about access first before excess, right?
yeah.
I found Lee Gazan's bill. It was Bill C-223. That was Lee
Oh, okay.
Gazan's bill was Bill C-223, and maybe that's not active anymore because that was back in February of 2022. But
Oh,
it was C-223 was the one that she introduced.
okay.
But we are approaching the end of the show, I wanted to say as well. So I didn't know
Okay.
if you
Yeah.
wanted to do closing comments.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And well, first of all, um, I'll pass it over to you, Neil. Like, I mean, first, just to kind of recap on kind of what we covered, and then, yeah, then definitely I'm gonna pass it over to Cheryl. Then I'll do our closing comments too on that one.
Okay. Well, it's been a great show. We started uh, talking about the CDB, the Canada Disability Benefit, and we've kind of migrated over to talking about housing. So it's been a good show. And I like the fact that you did mention a really good point, Cheryl, about, you know, as an advocate, you can kind of lose sight sometimes of the fact that there is a lot of good things that happen in government, but sometimes we can get distracted about all the bad stuff, all the bad stuff, right? But it's important when you wear that advocate hat to
Mm.
acknowledge that, like you said, the glass half full versus
You
the glass half
yeah.
empty all the time.
You have to, or you'll burn out
Yeah.
Hmm.
and you won't be back.
Yeah.
And that's already hard because, um, being an activist is hard, and it takes your resources. And being a person living with a disability, when it makes you very precarious if you're run down too. You're like, I don't, I
Yeah.
can't do this. And you've got to have people that are able to be in it for the long haul, and
Yeah.
are, able to be activists in the way that they know how, and
Mm.
that there isn't, a barrier to participation, whether it's, physical or social or economic. You want to be able to do that. Well, I want to ask you quick. I know we're going to get going, but what was the feedback, Brent, when you gave your comments on the air? Did any other callers come after
Yeah.
you I'm
There,
in the same boat or talked about
yeah,
the same thing?
yeah, there was one feedback of a person that kind of echoed what I said and said I can relate
Yeah,
to what to what he's going through, and this person was making much higher payments on rent.
yeah,
So, and somebody that's on like I just kind of conclude that topic is I want anyone who's listening to the podcast. It's people with disabilities who are seniors, right? I mean, 65 years of age, it doesn't have a stop sign saying, that's when your disability ends. And that's why I want to see these
yeah,
programs extended right across so that it's going to help seniors with disabilities. As we get older, we get more disabilities. You're born with a disability. You can get a disability at any time in your life.
yeah,
And
that's sure.
having the opportunity of going on the radio and talking about just a brief thing about housing and how it affects, I mean, my
Yeah,
situation personally, it really was, it
it's
really replenishes kind of what I advocate
yeah,
for, that to bring
it
the inequalities forward, right? I mean,
it makes a big difference, doesn't it?
it does.
You speak out, and some of it is personal, and you feel vulnerable.
Yeah. But
For some people, they suffer in silence because
yeah.
there's a stigma or there's a shame. They feel okay, it's my fault, or led to believe that they made bad choices or it's their fault. They suffer in silence is my thing. People don't like to say I can't afford something, right?
Yeah.
It's hard. But when people, and amongst all the other things that make people feel vulnerable, when they hear themselves in what you're saying, it takes a great courage to be the first one to speak up. But it happens in all different kinds of marginalized communities. We have, people who are brave enough to say, this isn't enough money. I
Mm-hmm.
can't feed myself properly. And if you
Mm-hmm.
are a parent, no parent wants to say, I don't have enough money to do a good job for my kid. Who's going
Yeah.
to do that? You suffer in silence a lot of times. So it takes a lot to build a community. I mean, look at when we talk about issues of um, decriminalizing non-prescription drugs, safe injection sites, all of those issues that are at different paces, different levels across the province,
Mm-hmm.
different provinces, different municipalities. It When it is being addressed, whatever level it's at, it's because there have been incredible people who have shared their pain and suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And I, no matter what kind of activists we are, when we're talking about marginalized people,
Mm-hmm.
it starts with individuals speaking up before I realize, oh, this is a thing. This is a whole community. Like, we need to speak up together. I mean, look at, even like, Pride Month and
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of issues. It takes that community building, and just something as small as you getting on the radio and asking about your things, about your struggles with how you can afford to have a decent roof over your head.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just helps other people. I think it's affirming to at least know, like, I am not alone in this. It is a systemic issue. How can I add my voice to it in the various ways that we have nowadays, right? So that was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, I actually really value the opportunity every time I do get a chance to advocate to get on and on the radio and even having, guests, like yourself, Cheryl. I mean, come on and we kind of recap of where current things are at. I mean, basically people who listen to the podcast or listen to the radio, they can resonate or they can say, yes, yes, I go through that or yes, I want the opportunity to come out and talk about lived experience and
Yeah,
I think what it's all about is connecting communities together and talking about the issues and coming to a resolution of all the
Yeah.
inequalities of how do we make things better
Yeah.
for society in general. I mean, for my advocacy work, I take little breaks in between. I go for nice walks around our neighborhood. Just put music on, and I listen to nature sometimes, and I
Yeah.
listen to the birds just kind of going over, and it's just so relaxing, I find,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
kind of put things into perspective, and it pace myself, and that's what I have to do, and because yes, it is a long haul, and I try to be there for a voice for people to come on to the show, and and just definitely talk about what they want to talk about, and they come with ideas. A lot of our shows, they have different ideas and different perspectives, and I value that. I think they're great ideas of different
Yeah.
viewpoints. Yeah.
The more you people do that, and they're more conversant in these ideas, the opportunity affords itself, whether it's at a candidate debate at any
Mhm.
level of government, or a conversation around a table planning an event, or whatever it is. It just helps people to be able to find the way that they want to convey it, that they want to put their marker down and say, yeah, I'm going to placehold for people living with disabilities. I'm going to
Mhm.
placehold here, and this is what I know and how I know it. Like,
Yeah.
you don't feel comfortable doing that if you are only in, and you truly believe that you are in isolation. You
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
One of my neighbors this morning says, Brent, you should run for provincial office. My
yeah,
jaw dropped, right? I was just like, oh, well, have a great day, right? I just
Breaking with Brent.
I
Yeah.
had no comment on it. I said, well, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I said, I have
Well,
a podcast. I said, I have a podcast to do later. I have to get going. I got lots to do.
nice. Nice. No, I'm
Yeah.
I'm I'm glad that you are doing the podcast, and
Yeah.
that you do have a good way for your that works for yourself to be able to decompress, right?
Yeah.
We all have to decompress, because things are really bad. And I'm just going to leave it with this, because
Yeah.
I said I lived in Windsor. I'm in the automotive capital of the world.
Hmm.
Basically, when
Mhm.
you put Windsor and Detroit together,
Oh,
Yeah.
and
wow.
we have all this manufacturing here, and these were good middle class jobs, and that's what kept, or what keeps, like, the in-ground pool
Hmm.
company, or you know take out pizza every Friday night. These other small businesses
Yeah.
can't thrive if we don't have a middle class to help small
Mhm.
businesses and to keep things going. And all of it's collapsing, and people are under stress, but the collapse is more in the way of all those gears, like just picturing the clockwork, right? The small gears are not turning, the little bit bigger gears turning the big, like there's an invisible hand turning the big gears, and
Hmm.
these little gears are just corroding, and people are really stressed about it, because we have this excess.
Yeah.
And I do not in any way believe that someone who's taken risks and has been an innovator shouldn't get rewarded. Of course you should. I
Hmm.
believe that. However, that is not the case with a lot of these conglomerates that are taking advantage of workers, and the people who are making millions of dollars a year in bonuses, when you have people that are working that can't afford to buy the car that their neighbor builds.
Mhm.
Then
Mhm.
what do we do? Like, this can't afford to buy a house that the developer says only this size house in this price range is profitable for me if I'm going to pay my workers a decent wage. This is the only profit that's worth it to me. It's broken, broken, broken. So thank you for helping us just be positive and say, even though it's broken, we're people that know how to use a little tube of crazy glue and put little
Yep.
pieces together and make new parts for things. And if there's a rip in it, we know how to patch it. So thanks for the opportunity to be with you guys today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Cheryl. Thank you very much for coming on today. Look forward to having you back on very soon.
Okay. Have a good
Yeah.
one. Bye,
Yeah,
guys.
Thanks,
yeah.
everyone.
Thank you, Cheryl.